On today's show, we have our 1 month into the season awards, including best player, best coach, biggest surprise, biggest disappointment, and a whole lot more. Then we wrap up our weekly countdown and power rankings. It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA Friday, your daily podcast on the NBA. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. The Friday boys are back. It's been, a month, Adam, since we have last talked on this show. I've been out. You've been out for different reasons too, and now we finally get together. And we couldn't ask for a better time to come back together after about a month, because we're going to jump right in to our 1 month in awards. Let's just get right into it, starting with the best player. Adam, who's been the best player in your mind 1 month into the season?
Yeah, Giannis Antetokounmpo. This is like, you kind of want to get edgy. When you ask a question like this, you want to I'm going to shock the world. I'm going to find the gem. I think it's Giannis. I mean, he's just been absolutely dominant. And the numbers are just his normal numbers. I mean, he's putting up 30 points on good efficiency. He's got 12 rebounds a game, 5.5 assists. Those are typical Giannis numbers, but he's just been dominant. The Bucks look dominant. They're not even complete yet, and they look like the best team.
I have no problem with Giannis. He's the best player in the world. Can't disagree with that, although I am going to disagree with it. I'm going Luka. I'm going Luka with best player. He leads the NBA in scoring. His usage rate rivals peak James Harden, peak Russell Westbrook, but he's being really efficient. He's doing everything for a Mavs team that's in the thick of a playoff mix, and he's probably doing more and all of that with less than what Giannis has, less than what I think Jayson Tatum has, who I think is also in this mix. You could make an argument for Steph Curry, but his team is losing. Luka's team is winning, just like not as much as Milwaukee or Boston, but they're winning, and they're winning because of Luka. I'm going to go with him. He scored less than 30 points in a game only twice this season. That's incredible.
Here's my kick. And this is coming from, obviously, I'm covering Denver. I'm covering Jokic. I know what he did the last couple of years. It was so impressive watching him carry a team to where they were. Luka's doing the exact thing this year. You can make a case Steph Curry is in this conversation as well with what he's doing. Then you see a player like Jokic this year with a good team around him. His numbers have dipped, and he's been more dominant. I think the same thing's going on with Giannis right now. They're 9-2 in games in which he's played. He missed one or two. I can't remember if it was one or two that he missed and they lose those ones. But 9-2 when he plays, missing Middleton, been short Drew. They've had guys in and out. Doesn't matter. They are steamrolling people right now. I think that he's at the top of his. I actually think there's a lot of players at the top of their game right now in the NBA. It's like a underrated storyline.
Yeah.
There's a handful of very, very, very good players, including Steph Curry, who are at the top of their game, and it's pretty incredible to see.
Yeah, a bunch of players like Steph. LeBron has been LeBron.
Yeah,
Kevin Durant has been awesome too. And those are the three players who've sort of defined the last decade, and their teams right now are out of the playoff picture. And then you have a whole other crop of Giannis and Luka, kind of these established, Tatum, young but established guys, Jokic, Embiid, all these guys who are right in the thick of the playoff race where they should be. And then you have like a whole other, like the rising star crop, the Ja Morants, other guys that we're going to talk to about later, or talk about later on in the show, who are lifting their teams into this picture too. So I think the NBA is loaded. We could go for this award. We can go Luka, Tatum, Giannis. We can go in so many different directions. There's so many. There's so much depth of talent in the NBA right now. It's crazy.
It is good. Yep.
Let's go to Coach of the Year. Not Coach of the Year, Coach of the first month. I don't know how we're saying this. I know they've lost a bunch of games lately. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. I'm going Will Hardy. I think I've kind of got two that are sort of neck and neck, but I'm gonna go Will Hardy, and I'm gonna go with Will Hardy now because I don't think he's gonna be up for this award again for the rest of the season. I think we've basically seen the best of Utah already. And my honorable mention, I'll just tell you, it's Joe Mazzulla from Boston. He's probably going to end up getting this at some point later. He's going to actually.
You think?
I think he'll actually be in the running for Coach of the Year. I think he's doing an awesome job for Boston. We could just talk about him and just sort of give the nod to Will Hardy a little bit. But just to talk about Will Hardy, despite the string of losses recently, I think the team has just figured out, okay, this is what we've got. We got a bunch of guys who can just handle the ball, a couple of guys who can shoot, a couple of big guys who can shoot. And they just sort of figured out a system that works. They move well, they play hard. They're top 10 still right now in offensive and defensive rating, which is not going to happen all season, but that's not important because we're just talking about the first month. They're fourth in potential assists, which just suggests how well they move the ball, and they're giving up the third fewest threes defensively in the NBA, which shows that they're connected defensively and they're giving up the shots that they want to give up. I just think they're a really well-coached team, regardless of the wins or losses right now. I don't think they're as talented as they were. I think they had a lot of hot shooting that they benefited from that they're going to regress back to the mean. But that doesn't mean they're not well-coached. I think Will Hardy's been a really good coach.
It's clear that they're extremely well coached. And one of the storylines to me of the NBA over the last 6-7 years has been a new wave of coaches coming in that have very distinct characteristics. They kind of understand what works, even for a team like Utah, which is talented, but not supremely talented. They have good players. And then just putting them in unique spots, the way he's unlocked Larry Markkinen and had him, well, he'll probably pop up on this list a little bit later, having him doing things that he hasn't done in his career and excelling at those things. Initiating as the ball handler in sets and different things like that. So I think there's no question. He's a great candidate. I would not be surprised if he was like sort of a unanimous one if you polled people so far. The other guy that I think is in the Will Hardy spot on my list is JB Bickerstaff, which is to say that if we did this 1 week ago, it would be Hardy and Bickerstaff, no question, 1A, 1B. Both of those teams have gone on extended losing streaks, but to me, the Cavs, like Utah, have done some things this year with a unique lineup that I think are so outside the box and so unique with how they're bringing their bigs outside and having them do some very cool things that open up the paint. You worry. You look at Minnesota. You got two bigs. I know it's a different situation. It's not apples to apples, but you're having issues with how to get inside and issues with how to open up the paint. Cleveland has not had that issue. They've been absolutely fantastic. But if I gave this award right now, mine would go to Chauncey Billups. I'm very surprised by this, but Portland has been fantastic. Their roster really looks complete. And I feel like Chauncey, who had a tough year last year in his first year, I feel like has taken a lot of lessons and has become a very, very good coach. And Portland, to me, I've had to elevate them a tier or two just based on how they played so far this year.
The way that Damian Lillard and other guys on that team talk about Chauncey Billups, sometimes players talk in the media about their coaches and they're saying all the right things. It rings true. It rings authentic to me when you listen to Damian Lillard talk about how he feels about Chauncey Billups and how they feel about what they're doing. And I've been watching a lot of Portland Trailblazers recently, and I just had them on their game against Brooklyn right before we started recording here on Thursday night. But they move the ball well. They're not just relying on, hey, Damian, just go run pick and roll with whatever big is on the floor and save us. Like, they're running good sets. Defensively, they're connected. They're top 10 in defense. I do want to talk about Portland a little bit later on, but Chauncey Billups is also a good one. Really good coaching happening right now in the NBA.
And they've won in different ways, too. They've had a lot of guys. Simons has won games for them. Obviously, Lillard's going to win games for them. Nurkic has won games for them. Jeremy Grant has won games for them. So they've just had a lot of different guys step up. And it's funny, you look at their net rating for a team with their record is actually not that great. They're for 10-4. They have a plus 2.3 net rating. But that's just because they've executed very well in some close games and some late games and had big runs and big moments.
Yeah, and he's got the respect of that locker room, too, pretty early on. Again, just the second year. The other night, he benched Nurkic at the end of the game. Nurkic is a core piece of that team as much as anybody besides Damian Lillard. He benches him at the end of the game, goes with Drew Eubanks at the end just because he was playing better. I don't know that there's a lot of coaches that can get away with something quite like that. And you saw Nurkic on the sideline cheering on his teammates, everything like that. It seems to be going well right now in Portland. Let's move on to Rookie of the Year. This one feels like it's a shoo-in right now. I think this one we could give this guy the Rookie of the Year award already. It feels like Paolo Banchero leads all rookies in minutes, points, rebounds. He's second in assists among rookies. The other week, Draymond Green had some really cool things to say about him, saying like, "Hey, I've never faced an Orlando Magic team that felt that confident in what it is that they can do." Paolo Banchero feels like he's changed a lot of what's happening in Orlando.
He's been fantastic. I mean, those numbers that you mentioned are just insane. 23.5 points per game this deep into the season for a rookie is really impressive. Especially, I mean, the scouting report now has him as line item number 1. And for him to be able to kind of handle that and navigate it so well is really impressive. So I agree with you that I think this one is probably the easiest one. But we do have to give a little love to Benedict Mathurin, who is
absolutely
on a per minute basis, not really behind him, which is crazy to say. He's averaging 20 points per game in 7 fewer minutes, shooting the same percentage from the field, but a significantly higher percentage on higher volume from the 3-point line. He's at 45.5%, which, by the way, 45.5% for a rookie. First of all, 45.5% from a 3-point line on 6 attempts per game is absurd for any player. Yeah. Absurd. Those are Steph Curry numbers like early on in his career. But for him to be doing it as a rookie is absolutely insane. It's just the minute production isn't quite there. So you do have to give an edge to Paolo.
I love Benedict Mathurin, and not only because I have him on my fantasy team. He plays with a swagger, a confidence. If you're a Pacers fan, you got to feel so good. Within 2 years, you trade Domantas Sabonis for Tyrese Halliburton. Okay, boom. Core piece going forward of your backcourt, point guard of the future. And then you get Benedict Mathurin in the draft, and you're like, all right, cool, boom. Within a few months from one trade deadline to the draft, you've got your backcourt of the future. It's pretty incredible what's happening in Indiana. We'll get to the most improved player next, and one of our nominations could dramatically change the trade market. We're going to talk about that next. But first, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn how to do everything from the art of negotiation to songwriting. And with over 180 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. Masterclass is accessible on your phone, web, or your smart TV, offering classes on a wide variety of topics, all taught by world-class instructors at the top of their fields. Each class is broken out into individual video lessons, usually around 10 minutes long. Members can explore at their own pace, and each class is supported by downloadable materials, class guides, recipes, or more. You can find all of these things available in all of these classes at masterclass.com. Hundreds of video lessons from 180 plus of today's most brilliant minds, available anytime, anywhere on iOS, Android, desktop, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. Learn how to write anything from a book or a screenplay to just a letter. Learn how to communicate with your boss or your family. Learn how to make a dinner worthy of a Michelin star, or just how to make really good scrambled eggs. Explore lessons in order that you would like across your phone, tablet, Apple TV, computer, and on the go with audio mode. Lessons of approximately 10 to 15 minutes in length easily fit into your everyday life. An annual membership starts at $180 a year, and I highly recommend that you check it out this holiday. Give one annual membership and get one free. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedon. Terms apply. Back here with Locked On NBA. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. We are continuing along with our 1 month in awards across the NBA. We've done Best Player, Coach of the Year, and Best Rookie. Let's move on now to Most Improved. Adam, who do you got?
Most Improved. I mean, this one's actually tough, because the guy that I think most people are going to say is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And that's a great answer. It's a very, very good one. I mean, he's at this moment, he could have made the list of best player in the NBA, honestly. You could at least had a fringe argument to make for him. He has improved his scoring from 24.5 to 32.5 points per game. That's a major leap. I don't expect those numbers to hold. And we've all seen the in the paint numbers, the drives, how he gets there. They're not comparable. Whenever there's a player that's an outlier, he's basically like Giannis. And then he just you can't keep him out of the paint, and he's so efficient when he gets there. Does it differently than Giannis, obviously.
He reminds me a little bit of Luka too. Just Shai's a really great athlete, but he doesn't necessarily use that athleticism to get to his spots, right? He's not Ja Morant, who's just blazing into the paint, and there's just nothing you could do about it because you're just not going to be as fast enough.
So he doesn't use the speed, but Wes, I think he uses, and it's this I like the Luka comp because
angles and change of pace. He's slithery,
he's like
he's at the basket making a layup.
It's almost like he goes slow until you make your move, and then he reacts so quickly. So the moment you slide your feet one direction, then he goes the other, and he's just so good at picking the exact moment when you commit one way or the other and then going. He's been incredible. He's not my pick, but I have a feeling that he's going to be most people's pick here.
Yeah, I mean, he's my guy. I think every year we see somebody like this that kind of takes that leap from, all right, good player, to, oh my God, is this guy one of the best 15 players in the NBA? Last year it was Ja Morant, right? Last year, I think we all knew that Ja Morant had star potential. And by the way, we knew that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had star potential.
Right.
But to see it actually happen on the court and him average more than 30 points per game, and you watch it, it's not empty stats, right? I know OKC, they're an okay team, right? They're probably not they're not going to the playoffs, right? They're not winning a whole bunch of games this year, but it's not just empty stats with him. You could see him thinking the game through, getting to his spots, contributing to the offense in a way more than points, getting his teammates involved defensively. He's really bought in defensively too. I just think he's tremendous. I kind of teased it going into the last break about how it could change the trade market. There's nobody more upset right now that we're talking about Shai in this way than Knicks fans, right? Because as soon as Donovan Mitchell gets traded to Cleveland, every Knicks fan was like, well, maybe we'll just send the Donovan Mitchell package to OKC for Shai. They're not trading Shai now. He's too good. You just said he might be the best player. He could have been up for best player in our previous awards. So it feels like OKC's got a guy now. We'll see eventually when Chet Holmgren gets back, and Josh Giddey is nice too. I'm not going to turn this into a whole Locked On Thunder thing, but SGA has been awesome, and he's my guy for most improved. I am interested to hear who your other name is, though.
Well, so I got 4 names here that are all interesting, and it's hard because most improved is just so tough. Like, what are you leap from a nobody to a rotation piece to a main guy to a superstar? It's hard to quantify those, but I have 3 other names. Lauri Markkanen we talked about already, but I mean, he looked like a good player, maybe questionable fit places to all of a sudden he's the best player on a pretty good Utah team. And now I think he's a guy that like lots of teams would covet. If you said Lauri Markkanen was available, a lot of people would start being going, oh, I wonder if he fits, what we're doing
more than
here.
A first round pick. Does he get Utah if they decide to move him?
I mean, yes, he's a good player. He's got such a unique skill set. He does a lot of different things, and he has a high basketball IQ. He's an ultimate. I mean, we're now in like 3rd draft with him because he's been in the league. I think Utah was the 2nd draft, but he's now, I just think, a player that people look at and say, okay, that's a guy. The other guy that I think is under the radar maybe a little bit is Desmond Bane, who's off to an incredible start.
Mention. Yeah.
And it's because he's a guy that went from a very good player, like a good number 2 guard at 18 points per game to now 25 points per game, maintaining efficiency as you up the volume. And to me, I didn't think of them as a duo. And I do think of them as a duo now, him and John Morant. Like, that is a backcourt duo. Yeah. And, that's a big leap to make. And then lastly,
Desmond Bane has gotten, he's my honorable mention because he's also improved so much as a playmaker too. You could see him putting the ball on the ground, making plays, kicking out. Like, he's shown some flashes in that way that I don't know that we saw last year quite as much. I know he's been out for a little bit, but when he comes back, I'm with you. I mean, Desmond Bane, John Morant, best backcourt in the NBA. They have a claim to it. Bane definitely deserves to be on this list.
And then my last guy, this is, again, a completely different type of most improved player, but Bol. Who would have guessed that Bol would all of a sudden be a candidate for any kind of award? Who would have thought he would be a candidate for minutes, let alone an award? But here he is averaging 12.5 points per game, being, extremely efficient on his shots, 67% effective field goal percentage, 62% from the field while taking 2 threes a game, making 41% of them. He's been incredible. The blocks are through the roof, 2 blocks per game in 25 minutes. He's intriguing. I think Orlando, he's like, I can't say he's the story of the Orlando Magic. That's Paolo Banchero, but he might be the second story in Orlando, and they have a lot of good stories.
Yeah. I love it. Bol appearance on the list. Let's move on to biggest surprise. My biggest surprise is that Kyrie got suspended. I'm kidding. We all knew that was going to happen at some point. My biggest surprise is the Portland Trailblazers. You brought them up earlier. I got to a couple other Portland notes here. Number 1, Damian Lillard looks like himself, back from the abdominal thing that he was dealing with last year. He seems really happy with his teammates, the way he's talking in the media about it, the way he's acting on the court. It's not just Damian Lillard, please bail us out. He found Josh Hart for a game-winning corner 3 the other week against Miami. That was kind of interesting because usually that's Dame time and he's going to take that shot. But the offense isn't just requiring him to do everything anymore. Jeremy Grant, best scoring stretch of his career. I got to admit, I was not the biggest Jeremy Grant guy going into the season.
Sure.
He's starting to turn me a little bit. I think he's really helping them. Anthony Simons is just letting it fly. Shaedon Sharpe has had some moments. Good rookie for them. And I think the biggest surprise for me with Portland is that they're 7th in defensive rating. And that's without Gary Payton.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're doing it. You mentioned Chauncey Billups before. Absolutely should be mentioned in terms of the best coach so far. Maybe that's the answer here. I think it's Dame's leadership, Chauncey Billups' coaching, and just a whole lot of buy-in happening right now in Portland. That's why they're my biggest surprise.
3 20-point per game scorers. I mean, you got Damian Lillard at 28, Anthony Simons at 22, and Jeremy Grant at 21. Jeremy Grant, by the way, taking 5.5 threes a game, shooting 49%. So he's been incredible so far. The team's been incredible. And then, as you mentioned, I know this is an unquantifiable thing, but the vibes are just up. So there, that's a team that kind of is off to a great start, and it is creating momentum for them as they keep going. So
do you like the new uniforms with it's like the carpet in the Portland airport? It's that bright green against the black there.
I don't, but they're not for me. Like, sometimes jerseys are best when they're for the people they were made for. These are for people of Portland who I think love them. They're the inside sort of like, nod to their city and to their carpet, I'm told, at the
carpet in the
PDX
airport. Yeah, it's like
at the airport. So
the first time I went into the Portland airport, they're like, just wait until you see the carpet. People kept telling me, and I went and I saw the carpet. And I was like, yeah, that's carpet.
That's a great carpet. Wow.
That's a great carpet. Yeah.
We should make
what a
these into
rug.
jersey.
Yeah, let's put them on our jersey. One, just word of advice to Portland. Like, everything doesn't have to be like the bachelorette party sash on every uniform. You could do a different design. All right. Just one thing.
All right.
Did you have a different surprise?
I mean, Utah would have been up there. I mean, it's not. I think Portland's my surprise. They're the team that has most surprised me so far this year. But you could say Utah and Cleveland a week ago were there.
Biggest disappointment.
Actually, if I had one other surprise, it would be 3-point shooting. The fact that we have so many players in the NBA taking and making threes at the volume that they are right now. I can't remember what the number is, but it's multiple guys making 45% of the threes while taking, a good chunk of them. So
yeah, I saw that stat floating around the other day. I can't quite remember. It's basically only for a full season, Steph Curry is the only player that's ever done it, and now it's like several players doing it this year. Kind of stat.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we've got we've already got 3 players
KCP,
averaging more than 10 3-point attempts per game. Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. Steph Curry, Michael Porter Jr. You've got who else is on this list? I think Dean Wade is somehow 18 of 36 from the 3-point line.
Wade, yes.
Kevin Herter is at 53%. So you just got, it's like a lot of guys, and that's surprising. And it's funny because it's kind of is a storyline. Like, is this a thing that's going to normalize? Is this a normal thing for a month sample size? I don't know the answer to that. I don't have the tools to kind of find that. But is that a thing that normalizes and then we get back down to maybe one guy does it? Or is this just a sign of things to come in the NBA that, no, we're a decade into the 3-point revolution and guys are just better shooters than ever before?
Going back to SGA, that's kind of what makes him so interesting too, because he's basically rejected the 3-point line. Instead of taking more, he's been taking less and less over the last few years, and he's scoring more than 30 points per game, which is pretty unheard of. But I do think in terms of the normalization of it, it feels like every team just needs somebody who's going to take 9 threes in a game. Like, every team just needs that guy. And so by definition, we're going to have like 30 of those guys at least, right? And there's some teams that have multiples of those guys. So I do think it's starting to be normalized a little bit. All these teams always say the same number. Everybody wants to be between like 36 and 43 point attempts per game. So you're going to need more guys to shoot more threes. Our biggest disappointment is on the other side of the break. But first, let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for your sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, they have it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, I imagine you do because you're listening to this one, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fast and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. It's Friday, which means we are counting down to the weekend. We have our weekly power rankings. And Adam, I'm going to go with my BCS rankings. I'm going to explain this. We got our BCS rankings. No, it's not the Bowl Championship Series over in college football, even though I do want to talk about my UCF Knights and the fact that they're probably going to go to a bowl game. But this BCS is the Basketball Championship Society, okay? So kind of different than straightforward power rankings because it takes into account things like, do I really think this team is going to win the championship? So like a week ago, every power ranking had to have the Utah Jazz in its top 5. Yeah. But nobody actually thought the Utah Jazz was going to win the championship. Well, and so I was like, what's the point of a power ranking if we're going to rank teams that don't really have an opportunity to win the championship, that don't really have a chance? The BCS, that's where that comes in. So it's the Basketball Championship Society. I'm going to do a top 5 this week, although that number can even fluctuate week to week based on who gets in the society and who is kicked out of the society. I think we have 5 teams in the society right now. Number one, we could do this 2 ways. I could just go one at a time and we can talk through it, or I can give you all 5 and we can kind of debate the list at once. What do you want to do?
You give me the list one at a time, and I'll tell you what I think of them.
I'm going to start with number 1 and go down to number 5. So number 1, I really wanted to go with Milwaukee here because I just think they're the better team because they have Giannis. But I am going to go Boston. Boston has won 8 in a row. Milwaukee has dropped 3 of their last 5. They needed double overtime to beat OKC. Boston is just crushing teams by 7.7 points per 100 possessions. They're scoring at a rate that we've literally never seen before. So I have to go with Boston as my number 1 team.
You're wrong. They're the number 2.
Tell me I'm wrong. Is it Milwaukee?
They're the number 2 team because you're not seeing the Milwaukee Bucks play. You're seeing a hobbled version of the Milwaukee Bucks play. Their second or third best player, however you want to rank it, not being there to this point, who we know, by the way, plays a huge role for them on this team, makes them even more dynamic down the stretch, not being there. Then, of course, you have the losses from Milwaukee. When healthy, they're not really losing at all. So to me, both teams have been absolutely great. I think that I'm teasing you. I don't think you could have a wrong answer here. But to me,
as soon as Boston loses a game, Adam, I'm moving Milwaukee back to number 1. I really want to have the Bucks number 1. It just didn't feel like we could do it.
You're so fickle here. But no, I mean, in all sincerity, Milwaukee to me is the team I look at and I go, I think that's the class of the East. And Boston's right there, but I think Milwaukee's the class.
Milwaukee's number 2 on my list. It's 1A, 1B. I don't know. Giannis is Giannis. He's great. Brook Lopez back playing like he's going to be in the Defensive Player of the Year race. Their defense has been the best in the league by a mile. It's been the best in the league. It's been the best we've seen for a long time, just defensive rating. We haven't seen they're averaging or giving up like 104 something points per 100 possessions, which is not a lot. Milwaukee's number 2, but like I just said, 1A, 1B. I agree with you. Could go either way. Number 3, I've got Phoenix.
Ugh.
I know it's boring. Nobody wants to like Phoenix for some reason. They're just a really unlikable team. I don't know really why, but they just win games. I know they've lost 2 in a row without Chris Paul, but before that they were 7-3. They have the second best net rating behind Boston. I couldn't find anybody to put over the Phoenix Suns. They just win games and they win games efficiently.
I think it's the right call. They haven't looked quite as good without Cam Johnson, but we know he'll be back, and we know that they'll probably look very good again. They would get docked for me a little bit on the "do you believe in them" factor. So it's less about have they looked like a contender to this point, or have they looked like the third best team? That answer is yes, and more to are the ways they are winning give you more confidence based on what we've seen. How they've lost down the stretch, obviously in the finals 2 years ago and in the conference semifinals last year. Have those issues been addressed? I don't know that they have. In fact, I would say Chris Paul maybe he's coasting a little bit, but that I would think that I just haven't seen them look that way yet this year that would say, oh, okay, I feel like they have addressed some of their issues and they are now a better team, are going to close games better, have more different ways to beat you. Devin Booker looks a little bit better. But outside of that, they've looked good like they did last year.
To kind of keep the college football metaphor going, they kind of remind me of like what Notre Dame in football and college football has been over the last few years. Not really this year, but it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to be in the college football playoff. You're one of the top 4 teams, but do we really think you're going to win it? No, you're not. And so that's like Phoenix. It's like, you're always just sort of hanging around here, but you got to show me a little bit something extra for me to really buy into you as being a team that I could bet on winning the championship. So, but yeah, who do you put over them? It's hard at this point. I think you're going to like my number 4. I've got Denver.
Wow.
I've got Denver number 4 in my BCS Basketball Championship Society. They still don't have a signature win. They lost Wednesday night in a weird game against the Knicks. That win against Golden State would have been the signature win, that won in the second game of the year, but that doesn't look as good now as it did then. They need to get better defensively. But Adam, I love the roster. I love the talent. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They're going to get back. They're going to get guys back, including Nikola Jovic, the 2-time MVP from the health and safety protocols at some point. They're only going to get better. now is a good time if you're not believing in Denver to start buying stock in Denver.
Might
I
be a
love
week
this
early.
roster, and this is why it's the BCS. This is why it's different than power rankings. I just don't know that there's a team I feel better than at this point than the Denver Nuggets.
You know what's funny is you said that, and I'm kind of like, okay, wow, are you catering to me? Hot take. And now I'm looking at who the other contenders to pass them. And you're right. This is almost as much about who else is out there as it is an elevation of Denver. And now that I'm looking at it, I'm with you, actually. I do think Denver to this point has looked the best. The problem is, and people are going to look at their record 9-5 now. They were 9-4, who was the best record in the NBA, and the MVP, the two-time MVP, got COVID. So unfortunately, now Jamal Murray is out with COVID. Aaron Gordon's out with illness. That's 3 of your starting 5. They've been Bones Highland has been in and out of the lineup. He had COVID last week. He was the first sort of domino to fall. So they've actually been shorthanded. And unfortunately, I think they have been sneaky great. Their net rating is that they lost kind of big on in their losses that have kind of like weighed some things down. But you look at the numbers with their starting lineup. First of all, Nikola Jokic coming into yesterday was the number 1 player in plus minus. Just when he's on the court, the Nuggets are dominating. And really, it's when the Denver starters are on the court, they're absolutely dominating. They lost a couple games with questions about their bench, when Bones went out, they had to kind of scramble. They had a cluster, 3 point guards hurt in the same game. So you have to play a game without a point guard. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying, if you look at the record and thought 9-4 wasn't impressive, I think you could look at the 4 losses and say, okay, here's what's going on there. But Denver starters,
I weirdly feel better about Denver after all this weird stuff. The fact that they're still in the mix the way that they are, right? Like, you feel weirdly better about them because once they get their guys back, it's only going to be easier.
When they have been complete this year, which is like 7 or 8 games, they've been dominant. They've had stretches, first quarters that are 45-20 quarters or 45-25 quarters. The defense does need to improve. Although the starting lineups defense has been great. I know a lot of people will look at that and say, oh yeah, it must be the Jokic. You got to protect. Actually, they've been great with him on the court defensively. Just figuring out that bench has been a bit of an anchor. I'm with you. As I'm looking around, I actually think that Denver is the next best team after that top 3, which are in a tier of their own.
And it kind of brings us to the biggest disappointment, which we didn't get to before, but it's got to be the Golden State Warriors. They're sort of the team, the glaring absence from this list, and you can't put them on this list because I gave them the benefit of the doubt for a couple of weeks, and you just can't do it anymore. They're 6-9. They're 0-8 on the road. Steve Kerr is calling them basically a Drew League pickup team in press conferences. When you talk about good vibes in Portland, bad vibes right now in Golden State. There's a stat going around. I don't know if it's true. I probably should have checked it first, but that the Warriors starting their season 6-9, no team has ever won the championship after dropping 9 games in their first 15. I don't know if that's a true stat, but it kind of sounds true.
That's wild.
I just saw it kind of going around on social media. It doesn't mean that the Warriors can't do it. They still got Steph. He's playing at an MVP level, but Clay and Draymond are clearly just sort of aging into a new phase of their careers. And that young group, Kuminga, Moody, Wiseman, like Wiseman's in the G League now. None of those guys seem ready. DiVincenzo was a nice pickup. JaMychal Green, a nice pickup, but they haven't been nearly as helpful as Otto Porter and Gary Payton were.
Yep.
I don't know. Like, I don't really know what the version of this Warriors team is that wins the Western Conference, especially when you're talking about other teams that we've been talking about.
I mean, the version is that Steph looks better than he ever has. I know that's crazy to say. He's looked great for the last decade, but you just keep thinking there's going to be a regression. But him, like the rest of the league that are sort of the disciples of Steph, he seems to be more comfortable with, different types of threes. He's shooting as well as he ever has on volume, like he ever has. So
he scored 50 points the other night, and they still lost by 11, though.
In a blowout loss. Yeah. So that's discouraging. I will say, though, people are probably turning this off. So the people that got mad are not going to hear this apology. I actually do think there's one team that has a claim ahead of Denver right now, and that's Portland. We didn't mention them, but Portland 10-4 in the West. They did beat Denver by 20 points as SmackDown in Portland earlier this year. So I actually think Denver would be below them, but Portland deserves mention there.
I don't have Portland in my top 5. And
you're just not buying
into it. This is the part where everybody turns it off. I got New Orleans at number 5.
Wow.
All right. We talk about signature wins. Okay?
This is wild to me.
Wins against the Nets before everybody started hating each other. So that one counts to me. Dallas, the Clippers, Golden State, Memphis. They have the 5th best net rating in the league. Zion has missed only 3 games, which is a good thing for him. That's an improvement. and they're also 2-1 in those games, so they haven't even really needed him. They just beat Memphis without him. Brandon Ingram has been really good. Trey Murphy III is giving them something in his second year. You're getting improvements from Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Larry Nance has been a good fit. This team lines up against anybody, and they're confident. I think they're really well coached with Willie Green. I kind of am trying to do something a little bit alternative here. I don't really think that the Pelicans are going to win the championship this season, but it kind of feels like Portland, New Orleans, they're kind of in that same zone where do you really, really believe in them? Like, how much longer do we need to see this? But it felt weird to only have 4 teams in the BCS right now, so I needed to kind of find a 5. I went New Orleans. I have no problem with having Portland in here either.
It's tough, man. Just kind of looking around here, like who is left. I think if I've already given my 5, if Portland is there, is that right? Boston, Phoenix, Milwaukee, Denver, Portland. Yeah, I guess that's my 5. If I was to go,
kind of wanted to put in there was like Philly, but I
yeah,
they will Philly in there.
A month from now, I do think we'll have a better list. Just some teams, Philadelphia being one of them, that we just haven't quite seen normalize yet. But the other one I think deserves probably to be here is Memphis. They look really dominant early on. I know they have some injury things going on right now with Desmond Bane and Jackson and different things. So I think that they're probably a team that deserves to be in consideration for top 5, if not 4 or 5 themselves.
So our top 4: Boston, Milwaukee, Phoenix, Denver. And then we've got that second tier of New Orleans, Portland, Memphis, and we're just keeping an eye on Philly right now. That's kind of how we feel.
I think I'll put Portland ahead of Denver for right now, but I suspect those things will change if Denver ever gets healthy at the same moment again.
Yeah, that's true. All right, that'll do it for today's episode. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On NBA wherever you listen to podcasts for 30 minutes of the NBA's top stories every day. Until next Friday, you can find me over at Locked On Heat. Adam is over on Locked On Nuggets. Thank you so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day.